Is it possible to set up a reef tank in 24 hours? Now, I'm not just talking about putting a couple of fish and corals in a glass box, I'm talking about absolutely everything from preparing the tank to cleaning the sand, filtering the water, mixing in the salt, cycling the tank, and getting everything ready so the salinity is stable, the temperature is stable, and the tank is ready to accept fish and corals to the point that they all look really healthy and happy and the tank looks completely established. Well, that is what we're going to find out today. Now, this video isn't intended as a how-to guide to show you how you can set up your tank in 24 hours, and really this is intended to show you how a little tank like this can look when it's completely established. And on that point, I need to tell you how I got the tank. It's a TMC First Wave 45, and I saw it at my local fish shop and thought it looked so good for beginners that I contacted TMC and asked if they'd send me one. So they gave it to me for free, but I'm not going to keep it when I finish these videos, and I'm going to give it away to a subscriber. Now, they also sent me the rock I'll be using for the aquascape, but I bought everything else you will see with my own money. Alright, with all that being said then, shall we get started? Okay, it's now 3:30 and I actually started this challenge at 3 o'clock. I'll tell you what I was doing in the first half hour a bit later on, but for now, the next job is to prepare the surface. Now, this is where the tank is going to be going, and I can already see just looking at it that it is at a funny angle. So I'm going to correct that and we're going to level it off. Now, you don't even need to look at the spirit level to see this is at a funny angle.
It was a funny angle.
So what we're going to do is level this off with furniture shims. Now, actually, these are little 3D printed furniture shims that I've made myself, but if I wasn't using these, I'd just use little furniture shims that you can get from any hardware store. Alright, I've put the shims down and it's not quite level. It needs to go up a tiny little bit, as you can see. So I'm going to go and print some bigger shims. Okay, I've started the print on the slightly larger leveling shims, and whilst I'm waiting for them to be ready, I'm going to get the tank up here and put it on the self-leveling mat. Alright, so the tank is roughly in the middle of the self-leveling mat, so it's where I want it to be. So now what I'm going to do is put the return pump in, along with the filter, the skimmer, and then I can start putting sand, rock and water in. Alright, in goes the return pump. It does go only one way. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze, but there we go. And there's a little nozzle that goes on the end. And now for the skimmer. Now the skimmer is also supposed to go in one way. So this is what it looks like. This is facing forward, and that is what it looks like at the back. So at the back, you have the little suction cups, and these stick to the back of the cabinet, the back of the glass, sorry. And then this little outlet here, or sorry, the inlet needs to face this way. So let's put that in. And she's going in the second chamber, which is after the heater chamber. Slots in nice and easy, and I'm going to stick the suction cup to the top there, so the skimmer isn't touching the bottom of the tank, which again should help with vibrations. And to check that I've got that all in right, I'm going to put the little cover on the back. There we go. So that fits in place perfectly then. Now I'm going to go and get the upgraded shims and see if I've got the leveling right. Okay, I've got the new cabinet leveling shims in, and we are almost perfect. It's maybe 0.5 millimeter too low, but that's pretty much spot on. Let's check the other side. Same story. Now that's not quite perfect, but that is totally fine. And this little self-leveling mat will do that last little bit for me. So we're all good and we can crack on with the next step. And the next step is to prepare the rock and sand. Now in terms of rock, I'm using the TMC one piece. So it's actually done. I don't need to do any aquascaping. But in order to get this ready to receive corals, I'm going to drill lots of little holes in it that are the size of the stems on frag plugs to make it easier for me when I come to putting the corals in. And this sand is fantastic, but it's really dusty. So I need to spend about half an hour or so giving it a proper clean under a tap. Let's go and do that. All right, to rinse the sand then, all we need is a bucket and a sink. Tap water is totally fine for this. You just want to get rid of all the dust. So let's crack on. This stuff is milky. You see how cloudy it is, milky it is, and there's little bits of black dust in there as well. I'm going to be here a while. Okay, so next job then is to deal with the rock. Now I want to drill little frag plug size holes in here. 16mm should be good enough for pretty much all frag plugs, but this stuff can be pretty brittle, so I'm going to need to go very carefully, and I'm going to be using a tile drill bit which is a little bit more sympathetic on rock like this. In terms of locations in the holes, I want them in areas that are going to get a good amount of light, which is good for corals, and basically on each of the ledges where corals are likely to be mounted. Better to have too many holes than too few, with the caveat that you want them nicely spaced out. Okay, this is a fairly small piece of rock, so I think I'm going to stop there. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes, which is a really good start, and there's probably still a few places we can put corals anyway with a bit of putty or super glue. So now let's go and rinse this stuff off. Okay, I'm going to be rinsing this off with the same bucket as I've used to make the sand clean, and as you can see, that has come up an absolute treat. Let's just give it a final stir, see if there's any final little bits of dust. No, we are pretty much perfect. That is really good. And I just left that there for, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes. So a full half an hour, and that's what it took to do the sand. In fact, I'm not going to use the same bucket because I need that for the sand. So I'm just going to run it under the tap gently and rinse off this dust. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a close-up look at those holes. There's one there that's not gone all the way through, but just about enough. It only needs to be deep enough for a frag plug, and the frag plug stem is, I don't know, less than an inch. So these should all be pretty good. There's the one up there. And 2 more. That one should just about be deep enough. And then the final one on top there, that's probably a little bit shallow. So what I'm going to need to do is probably either put a bit of super glue in there or some putty in there when I mount the coral, when I put the frag plug in, and then that'll just squish in place and hold it in place nicely. I'm going to be completely honest with you, drilling the rock actually went a lot better than I expected, and I had some super glue ready to hand in case I snap bits off, which I have done in the past, but I think the key was just going gently. Doesn't matter which super glue you use. I buy this Polyp Lab stuff because it comes in a little pot with loads of these, but you can buy any cyanoacrylate super glue from your local hardware store, and that will be fine in a reef tank. Okay, so we're going to do a quick clock check at this point, and you can see we are 1 hour and 25 minutes in. So less than 1.5 hours in, we've got the sand ready, we've got the rock ready, the tank is all set up and good to go. So the next step is water. Now I said at the start of the video that I'd actually started doing a few things before I started recording, and that was filtering the water. So I have my own RODI filter, so I can filter my own water for the tank. So what I did before this video started was I spent about half an hour making the water for this build. And I've now added it to the bucket, so now we can add the salt mix. Now I'm going to be using the salt mix that I buy for my main tank, and I happen to know that a 25 litre bucket of RODI water needs 950 grams of NIOS pure salt to make salt mix at the right level, which is 35 parts per thousand. So let's add that in. So in order to mix it, I've just got a spare power head that I've got lying around. That's going to do the stirring for me. So now I can just chuck this in and leave it to mix. Now I've been feeling guilty about this not being spot on level wise. So before I put the sand and the rock in, I printed some slightly larger leveling shims, and now the tank is sitting perfectly on a nice straight base. Okay, I'm now ready to put the rock, sand and water in the tank. There always seems to be a lot of discussion online about the correct order to do this. I'm not sure it makes a massive difference, but what I'm going to do is put the rock in first so it's sitting flush on the glass, not on the top of the sand bed, and that way if any burrowing crabs, snails, whatever go underneath it, it won't disturb the rockscape. Then I'm going to put the sand in, and then I'm going to put the water in. And that usually stirs up the sand and creates a load of dust, but I'm going to show you how to avoid that. We're just going to pop that in there, making sure I don't drop it. And there's only really one way this can go. I don't want it right at the back. I want there to be a little bit of space in case I need to access it, get my hand down there to clean or whatever. But that is about it. There's the aquascape. Next up is the sand. Now, I'm sure there are neater ways of doing this, and I'm going to end up getting water and sand in certain places, but I'm just going to whack it all in there. As you can see then, it's not exactly the neatest job in the world, but it doesn't really matter. I've just tried to get it roughly around the aquascape, in underneath where possible, without really being too fastidious about it. And I've got loads on top of the aquascape, but that doesn't matter because this will all settle in and that will all wash off when I put the water in. So here we are then ready to put the water in. All I'm going to be using is a little jug, but instead of pouring the water onto the aquascape or onto the sand, which is what normally people do, I'm going to pour it into the sump, into the rear chamber, and then it will come out of these tiny little weir holes at the side, which will mean it will trickle out much more slowly. And I just use a little flannel under the jug to take it from the bucket so I don't spill water all over my carpet. Okay, so the water is now in the tank, and there's a couple of things I need to tell you about before I move on. Firstly, you might have noticed that I didn't test the salinity before I put this water in. And that's because it's only been mixing in the buckets for about half an hour. So what I want to do is get it in the tank and completely mix overnight. Then I'll test the salinity in the morning and see if it's where it needs to be. And secondly, although I did my best to get rid of all the dust, there's still a little bit of cloudiness in the tank. And that's another reason why I wanted to get all of this done tonight so it can settle overnight. And what I'm going to do is pop in the little white bit of filter roller, filter floss that comes with the tank. That's going to go in there and hopefully filter out as much of the dust and the sand as possible. The third thing I need to tell you about is how much water I used. Now I use these brewing buckets, they have graduated litre marks on them, and this is 25 litres per bucket. I used one full bucket and 10 litres of the second bucket, so there is currently 35 litres of water in there. Now that might change slightly when I turn the pump on, and I might need to put a little bit more in, but it's good to know exactly how much water is in the tank, and it's interesting to note that it is less than the stated amount on the box because I have rock and sand in. Now the last thing we need to do is check in on where we are in the challenge, and we are 2 hours and 11 minutes in. So it's only taken just over 2 hours to get to this stage, so we're right on schedule. What I'm going to do now is put a heater in just to make sure the water gets up to 25 degrees. It's pretty warm today anyway, so it will be more or less there. But the only other thing I need to do tonight is turn the pump on, put the little filter roller in, and see how it is tomorrow. Then I can run a suite of tests, see if the water is ready for fish and corals, and then we can get down to the fun stuff. Now at this point I had to stop the challenge to go and prepare for the Sunday night live stream that I run here on the channel. So I lost all of the rest of the evening, and I've still got a ton of work to do before I can add fish and corals. And I just had to hope that the temperature and salinity was stable overnight, as I wouldn't have any time to make any corrections. So join me for part 2 when I'll be preparing the filtration media, heading over to my LFS to choose the fish and corals, and acclimating the livestock so it's all safe to go in the tank. And this is of course all while trying to avoid a dust storm, a bacterial bloom, and all of the other problems you can have with a new tank. So make sure you like and subscribe for part 2, and I'll see you next week.